Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to quickly do a book tag. I haven't done a tag in like forever, I think. I am going to film a vlog soon, but those take me a little bit to film and then edit. So I think in the meantime we'll do a quick little tag. It shouldn't take too long, something nice and fresh. I'm obviously doing the Finally Fall book tag, which goes around every fall season. I know we're already in the middle of fall, but I'm in South Texas and fall is just like coming towards us barely. I will put the full prompts down below. They are a little bit wordy, so I'm just going to give you the short prompt here. So yeah, I think we should just get started. The first prompt is name a book with a vivid setting, and the first book that I chose for that is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. I feel like this was probably the go-to answer for quite some time, and it's still one of the first books that I think about when I think vivid settings. I think this is supposed to be like a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but a very loose one. In this book, we follow a young woman who lives in a small like a village on the edge of a forest, and this forest is incredibly dangerous and almost has like a mind of its own. It's truly its own character, and in order to like hold back this encroaching forest, there is a magician who asks for a favor in return to like protect the edge of the forest, and he asks for a young woman, I think 18 years old, something like that, to be given to him, and he'll protect the people of the village or whatever. No one knows what happens to these women. There are rumors and such. Obviously our main character gets chosen. Naomi Novik's writing style is incredibly vivid and distinct. It might not be for everyone, and that's okay. I really enjoyed reading this just for the vibes alone, which is not something that happens to me. I'm not a vibes only person. I'm really driven by plot, but this one kind of stuck to me, and I do desperately need to reread it to like have a refresher and like get my older thoughts on it. I definitely think I need to do a reread of this one, but the forest setting is incredibly detailed. It is probably the most distinct part of this book when you come away from it. The second prompt is name a book that is beautifully written but also deals with a heavy topic like loss or grief. And for that I chose a book slash series that breaks my heart every time I reread it. You can see all these like tabs that I've made because I've read it multiple times, and A Great and Terrible Beauty by Libba Bray, also known as the Gemma Doyle trilogy. Throughout this book there are themes of loss and grief of multiple kinds: loss of family members, loss of innocence, loss of a lot of stuff. I just noticed that I have another Libba Bray book on this list, and that's okay. I absolutely love Libba Bray and I want to read everything that she writes. In this series we follow a young woman named Gemma Doyle, and she has grown up pretty much in India while it's under the control of England. She absolutely loves her life in India with her family, her mother, but then one day her mother dies under mysterious circumstances, and that kind of jump starts the events of this book. She gets sent to like a finishing school for young women who are of a certain class. I will leave it there, but there are a lot of supernatural things that happened for Gemma Doyle and the friends that she makes at this girls' school. There are a lot of aspects of this book that I really enjoy. Very tumultuous girl friendships that are not quite sugary, but they're also not quite so malicious. Secret society, shadow organizations, witch circles, things like that. Portals. This is technically a portal fantasy. I think the thing that breaks my heart the most, other than like some character deaths, is these women realizing that the society that they live in is not intended for them, made for them, or caters to them. It's truly like a loss. They experience ego death pretty quickly in this book, and it's very sad. Amazing coming of age story. I absolutely adore this trilogy and it makes me cry. I weep literally every single book. So the third prompt is share a nonfiction book that taught you something new. I have not read nonfiction in a while, so I'm just gonna pick something that I read while I was a uni student, and that is Charity and Sylvia by Cleves. I don't remember the historian's first name, but I have the book here. This book follows two women who essentially share their life together pretty publicly in a time period in the States that it would not have been common to be publicly with another woman. There are some stipulations to that relationship, but throughout the book we see like poetry that these women like wrote to each other and to other women. We see how these women lived their lives together in the same house without a man, owning property, owning a business without a man. I think the historian was very hesitant to outright say this is a lesbian couple, they're lesbians, but if this couple were alive today, I think most people would understand them to be like partners, if not in like a romantic sense, but definitely like life partners. I never really got into the sexual aspect of these two women's relationship, which is like a big part of the story, or a big part of their lives, as to how they could like be kind of public about each other without being public, you know what I mean? It's a really interesting story. I think the author does a really good job at like talking about these letters that these women wrote to each other as well as to other women. There's a little hint of like English literary analysis when the historian like analyzes their poetry and how like sapphic it can get. But yeah, these two women, Charity and Sylvia, were a big part of each other's lives. They were life partners, really. This project really came about when a historian stumbled upon a box of journals and letters and stuff that about these two women. So yeah, if you are interested in like some LGBT like nonfiction, this would be like a micro history that you might want to check out. The next prompt is name a fictional family, household, friend group that you'd like to be a part of. And I chose a group that I've absolutely fallen in love with within the past year, and that is Moon's group in The Cloud Roads by Martha Wells. This is the first book in the books of the Rexura, but you can really see Moon grow to love his new family in this series. This is probably my favorite thing that I've read this year. In this book, we follow Moon, who, by the way, I've mentioned this series multiple times in multiple videos this year. If you haven't seen me talk about them, Moon is a kind of shapeshifter type. He's kind of like a dragon, lizard, gargoyle type of creature that has like a ground form and a winged form, and he's still fairly young at like 40 years, but he's never quite met anyone of his species. He kind of bounces around different villages of different beings, not really knowing who he is. It also doesn't help that there's a natural predator that kind of looks similar to him, but he's not part of, and then he eventually meets like an older grandfatherly type who says, hey, like, I know what you are, we're like the same species, I can take you to a colony, my colony, and you can be a part of us. He doesn't realize that there's kind of some unspoken things in this deal, in this negotiation, and we see that unfold. This is a very vivid, unique fantasy world. This could also be like part of that vivid prompt, but this takes place in a fantasy world. No humans, nothing human-like. The author, Martha Wells, is an anthropologist, and a big aspect of these books is the author just describing different cultures that Moon sees. If you're big into like studying other cultures or anthropology, this book kind of lends itself to that. The relationships that Moon forms with the other Rexura, I'm in love. The author was never explicit with it, but things like same-sex relationships is never like a question, so much so that the author didn't even have to like write it in. So there's a part in the book where Moon is waking up next to a good friend of his named Chime, I want to say. It didn't click with me until like the third book that I was like, oh, he's also in like a somewhat relationship with him as well as other people. It's I wouldn't say like polyamorous relationship, but it's very open in terms of relationships. That it didn't quite click with me until like book 3. I was like, oh, that's the society that they live in. The author didn't even want to mention it. I love the series so much. So anyways, but that's just one aspect of the book that I really enjoyed. Other parts of the culture, food, taboos, stuff like that is also talked about a lot. The next prompt is kind of a fun one. It says show a pile of fall colored spines. So I'm gonna go get that real quick. Okay, so here I have, I think, a nice pile. I have some yellows, some oranges, some reds. We have Scythe by Neil Schusterman, Terrier by Tamora Pierce, Uprooted Again by Naomi Novik, Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins, City of Fallen Angels by Cassandra Clare, and we also have The Missing of Claire de Lune by Christelle Dabos. All of these books I have read, and I've enjoyed most of them. So yeah, I think this is a nice stack. The next prompt is share a book wherein someone is telling a story. And so we have another one of my favorite books, one of my favorite series by one of my favorite authors of all time, and that is Terrier by Tamora Pierce. This is technically a YA book, but I think it's one of these books where, one, I think it is palatable to audiences that read maybe adult, but Tamora Pierce does like to age up her characters, not super drastically in her series, and sometimes the content ages up with the characters aging up. This is the first book in the Becca Cooper series, which is a trilogy. It technically takes place earliest in her Tortal universe. She has written a couple series within this kingdom setting. This is my favorite one. I absolutely adore Becca Cooper as a main character. I love this journey that she goes through. In this book, we follow Becca Cooper, who at the beginning of the story, when we're reading all this through journal entries, so she's kind of retelling a story to us, but in the beginning of the story, she has basically started her job, a trainee for the guard, the city guard, not quite the army, but like a provost, you know, city guard. And she specifically wants to work in the poorest neighborhood, the neighborhood that she grew up in, because she knows the people, she knows the area, she knows the culture, and she truly wants to make this district a better place within the capital. She gets involved in solving these crimes, these mysteries that really harm the people of this disenfranchised neighborhood. I guess you can call it like the equivalent of like an inner city. A lot of the plots and inciting incidences in this trilogy, each one kind of follows a different kind of like crime event. They really harm the poorest of the poor, the people who cannot speak up for themselves. She is incredibly driven to like help them, despite the fact that this is not the wealthiest neighborhood. A lot of people just assume it's just full of like crime people who want to commit crime for the sake of committing crime. You know, she has a lot of sympathy for these people here. Absolutely loved this series. And right off the bat, I think at the beginning of the story, we're told that she is going to be a kind of legendary figure that has a huge legacy. You could technically start reading Tamora Pierce's Tortal universe here, since it's the first in the series, but you're gonna miss some kind of nods and Easter eggs to her previous work. I would personally just suggest you start in publishing order, and you'll eventually get to the series, but I think it's super worth it. If there's one thing that I think people might not like about this series, is that Tamora Pierce really does romance weird. It's not super formulaic, so some people might have some issues with it. I don't mind it. I do have some issues with certain love interests, but I love the story so much that I can like overlook some romance problems. The next prompt was share a dark, creepy read, and I chose And the Trees Crept In by Dawn Kurtagage. This is a YA horror novel, but it is incredibly off-putting. It's not super gory or anything, it's just very uneasiness feeling. In this book, we follow two sisters named Scylla and Nori. I think we mostly follow Scylla, and she and her sister have recently moved into their aunt's house that is very cursed, not a great place for young children to live. And almost immediately, it seems that after they moved in, it feels like the actual forest is getting closer to the house and like kind of suffocating it. There's also this weird boy that's kind of like at the edge of the forest who's kind of interested in Scylla, and there's also this like creepy like Slenderman-esque character that's always like in their peripherals. It's a very creepy thing going on. It's very disorienting, I think, because when I first read this, and I haven't read it since, I couldn't quite pin down like the time setting of this book. I feel like there were cell phones, but I felt like there are also nods that this kind of also took part in like World War I. Everything felt super unsettling. If you've ever been in like a room where the floor is uneven, the lighting is off, everything's kind of shaky, something smells kind of funny in the corner, and you feel super uncomfortable, this is like the entire like reading experience. But it's also very sad. There's a lot of traumatic things that happen, some dark imagery. If I remember correctly, I think there was some minor body horror and then domestic abuse as well. A couple triggers. It's horror, so make yourself aware of certain content that you might find too unsettling for a reading experience. So the next prompt is name a short, heartwarming read that could warm up somebody's cold and rainy day. I think this is a pretty easy, obvious answer, but it's Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This is a very cute, cozy fantasy read. It's described as a novel of high fantasy and low stakes. I know that the prequel is out or will be out soon. I think this is perfect for a rainy day because there's almost little to no conflict. There's like a few pages where a problem arises, but it's almost all like quickly dealt with. In this book we follow a woman named Viv who was essentially a mercenary. This is this character right here. She was a mercenary for quite some time, and she no longer wants to do that. She actually wants to open up a coffee shop in a little village and like set up some roots, and that is essentially what the story is about. There's nothing really much more to that. There is a slight romance. I think some people have unintentionally been misleading readers. There's not a huge sapphic romance. It's not going to take up a good chunk of the story. It's hinted at, it's referred to, but it's not major. But there's a little bit of like a sapphic thing. Very, very much side plot. Don't get it twisted. But this is very sweet, very quaint, adorable. I can't imagine anyone reading this and feeling incredibly anxious for any reason. Little to no conflict. If you want like just like characters being supportive and kind to each other, this is literally it. And the last prompt is name an old favorite that you'd like to return to soon. This is the libre that I am also adding on this list. That is The Diviners. I love this book. This book is one of my favorite books of all time. This is one of those reads that you remember so vividly that you can probably like speed read it, like if you wanted to reread it. I love this book. This is a amazing combination of like horror, mystery, coming of age, historical. I love this book. This book has everything that I love. It has ghosts, friendships, a romance that I actually kind of enjoyed. This takes place after World War I, but before the Great Depression in New York City. This book does a really good job of, at least to me as someone who's never been to New York, like showing off other aspects of the city that I might not know of, not having been there but like before myself. We follow a large cast of characters. In this particular first book, we do mostly follow a young woman named Evie who's kind of been run out of her like somewhat very Christian city in Ohio because of something that she did, and she's sent as like a punishment to go live with her uncle in New York City. Not really a punishment to go live in New York City like for free, but her uncle owns this kind of like occulty kind of museum, and when there is a serial killer in town killing people in very occult like ways, her uncle is like called in to help investigate, and Evie kind of wants to play a part in that investigation as well. This book features a lot of characters that are diviners, people who have some sort of like psychic ability, you know, supernatural ability, and we see a couple of them throughout the series. If you like multi-perspective stories, this has that. There's a lot of amazing characters that I feel are really vivid and distinct and well-rounded. I haven't heard the audiobook myself, but I've been told that it is very creepy and atmospheric, and there's music and sound effects and stuff, so maybe you want to listen to the audiobook. It is lengthy, but I fly through this book. I absolutely love this book so much. So those are all the prompts. Just a quick video to show off some books that you might want to pick up this fall. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please let me know if you want to participate in this tag, if you're going to participate. I'd like to hear anything you have to say down below. I will also link my social medias down below, as well as some far more important links. Feel free to like, dislike, comment, or subscribe, or do neither. It's all cool with me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.